Mike, turn your games down.
Hi, doing with another interview episode of Games My Mom Found. I am Mike Albertin, and who's with me tonight?
That would be me. I'm Glen Dahlgren. I am a computer game designer from way back, and I am an author of YA epic fantasy.
Okay. I didn't know they were young adult. I was looking at the books after we met. I was looking them up a little bit.
I actually didn't intend for them to be young adult. It kind of sort of happened that way. My main character was sort of in that age range, and so were the people who he surrounded himself with. But my first one is a little bit dark. Worried about putting that young adult label on it, but it seems like, but it actually won the gold medal for reader's favorite young adult epic fantasy. And so I guess they agreed too that it's young adult.
Oh, what book was that got published first?
What's that?
What was your first book?
That was Child of Chaos.
Okay.
It was the first book. It took me 20 years to write because I started it right after Wheel of Time shipped. And I was still full-time making games. And so that didn't leave me with a lot of time to write. So, here and there, I kept working at it until a couple of years ago, I finally finished it up. And now my rate is a lot better. I released another book called Game of War about a year after that one, and I'm about to release my newest book called House of Prophecy about a year after that one. So I'm hoping to keep to about a book a year.
That's pretty good, though. I mean, it just seems like a good pace. I mean, I think what Brandon Sanderson wrote like 3 or 4 giant books in 2 years or something.
Well, actually, he says a book a year is about right, but dang, I don't know how he did that. But the truth is, for indies, writing like a lot of books in a short period of time is kind of what they're all about. There's a group called 20 Books to 50K, which is about you need to write 20 books to get to $50,000 a year. And that's not, you're not a hit writer or anything. You're just writing books to a particular audience. And I can't do that. There's no way. I can't write a book a month.
No, that's a lot.
I mean, my books, the first one took me 20 years. I think about these things more. They've got some ideas in them that need to sort of, marinate for a while. I can't just sort of throw them out there. And that's fine. I mean, there are people who can do that. It's just not me.
Oh, it's got to be epic to write that many books in a short amount of time.
Oh, I don't get it. People who have sort of broken that code, I think most of them dictate. And then I guess they just send it to an editor to sort of clean up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I guess on like Kindle Unlimited, you're paid by page reads. So if people are there and they're just consuming everything that you're doing all the time, that you can make a living doing that.
That's pretty cool. When I was younger, I wanted to be an author, but that didn't go anywhere. So I became a father at 19. So that I used to write. All I did was read and write all day, every day, and then I got it. And then my girlfriend got pregnant, so that was the end of that. I had to go get a job. But
children change your life, absolutely.
Yes. But also a lot of young adult books can get pretty dark. I mean, you look at, would you consider Lord of the Rings young adult? Or I guess that's more adult, considering when you really do.
No, young Lord of the Rings, I think, certainly Harry Potter.
Which is pretty
dark. There were, yeah, and it definitely got dark. But those were young adult before young adult was a thing. They didn't create the genre until enough books had come out that they really wanted to categorize them. Because I think there was like middle grade and chapter books. Young adult really wasn't a thing, but now there's young adult, there's new adult, there's all kinds of interesting categories that, it's weird. And nobody really agrees on what specific things make a book put a book in those categories.
How would it feel if something's not super violent, maybe? Like, I'm trying to think of the one series that, Terry Pratchett. I can't remember his series, though. That's, like, huge.
Oh, that's the Discworld stuff.
Yes. I read the first one of that series, but I don't know if I don't know if that's considered young adult, because I remember that first book being very violent, from what I remember.
Honestly, violence is not a problem.
Okay.
Sex is a problem.
Oh, that makes sense.
And swearing is a problem. But violence often isn't. Graphic depictions of violence can be a problem. But actually, Terry Pratchett specifically has 2 different lines. He wrote some books specifically for young adult and some specifically not.
Okay.
In the same world.
I haven't read his books in a while. I only read the first one of his series a long time ago, and I remember really enjoying it.
He's one of my favorite authors. I've read everything that I could find.
I unfortunately don't read much anymore, unfortunately. I was just reading The Hobbit a couple weeks ago. I started reading that again, and I just fell in love with that book all over again. That's the thing about
Well, I have
a
a
good
good
book.
book.
It never goes away.
I have a suggestion for you.
Oh, one reason that I contacted you is I found out that you were the producer or lead. What was your you worked on the Wheel of Time game back in 1999.
Yeah, I was the sort of, I think, creative director, which was the designer plus producer plus sort of creative lead on that project. So I was the one who sort of came up with the idea, fought to get Jordan on board, fought to get a publisher on board, fought to get a team together to make that game, and then made that game with the team.
Okay. I mean, I couldn't believe that there was, because I actually had found out this game existed back in 2000. I want to say maybe like 15 or so, when I was very broke and pirating old games at that time. And I randomly came across this on one of those abandonware websites. I'm like, what is this? But I couldn't get it to run. I tried, and I couldn't get it to run, and I forgot it existed. It wasn't until a few weeks ago when I saw your post that the Wheel of Time game got re-released on GOG that I was like, okay, now I have to, and I went and bought it and tried it out. But it was just, I couldn't believe there was a Wheel of Time game, because it's a book series that I feel like wasn't as well known as it should be, in my opinion.
Well, so yeah, you're not alone in not knowing that the Wheel of Time existed. And part of that is because it was released into the teeth of a few different things. Quake 3 Arena just came out. Unreal Tournament came out at the same time. And specifically Unreal Tournament was a problem because GT was the same publisher for Wheel of Time, and they were in financial problems. They were having difficulties, and so they couldn't actively market both games. And Unreal Tournament was the safer bet. So they put all of their money into pushing Unreal Tournament. Wheel of Time got the short shrift there. Wheel of Time did pretty well, given that it was well reviewed. People seemed to love it. It got a ton of awards. I actually have some of them around here, but there's no video, so
You're good. Yeah, it's just audio.
yeah. So it did well, and it was well received, but it never really sort of entered the collective consciousness of the game playing public. But enough people connected with it, especially some of the book fans, that it stuck around. People were still playing it up until the moment that GOG released the new version. And in fact, GOG released it, I think, kind of underestimating how much people really wanted to play multiplayer. Because I think one of the reasons people are still playing it, it's not the single player story. And that's wonderful. Don't get me wrong, but that's a long time to play a single player story. It's 20 years.
Yeah.
So the people out there wanted to play multiplayer, but GOG didn't set up a master server. And so they said the only way you can play multiplayer is through LAN. And the community wanted none of that. And so I've been working with the community and with GOG and with the EP, the rights holder, and Night Dive Studios. And now we're setting it up so that there is a master server and that people can play online, and the community is just ecstatic about the idea of new blood.
I love seeing older games that might have gotten lost to time being resurrected in an official way so people can enjoy it. Like, I mean, I'm a person that if something doesn't exist, I'll get a hold of it other ways, but I'm always glad when something is publicly available in a way to buy it, especially like for this for $10. I mean, I went and picked it up when it was on sale because I wanted to own it. I wanted to officially be able to play it, and I have no problem with that.
It's not just that. It's the fact that GOG especially is taking these old titles and making it so that it's just seamless. You don't have to worry about going and getting all the patches and figuring out how to make it work on modern hardware. And it was a challenge. I mean, you said you tried making it work and it didn't.
Couldn't do it.
There were ways to do it, but it took some gymnastics to get there.
And I could run World of Warcraft, so I could run stuff. I couldn't get it to run.
No, that's right. That's absolutely right. But Wheel of Time, like a lot of the other games from Legend, like Deathgate and a few others, there are people out there with the rights to those games. They purchased them from Atari, who had it because they owned Legend. But they couldn't. They tried to release Deathgate, and then a week later it came down, and that was because they didn't have the book rights. Because a large number of our titles were based on literary licenses, and so Wheel of Time kind of stayed in this limbo where, people really wanted to play it, people wanted to get it out there, but they couldn't because the Wheel of Time license had been, who knows where that was. Well, turns out it was with the people who were making the TV show. And the people who were making the TV show really wanted to see the game out too, along with releasing the TV show. And so I was doing an interview with the Dusty Wheel, which is a Wheel of Time based, it wasn't about games, it was just about the license, it was about the books. I was doing an interview with them, and then I get a notice after I was done that the EP on the TV show wanted to talk to me. And this is what he wanted to talk to me about. He wanted to find out if I had some technical people on the names of some of the people who worked on the title, so maybe we could help get the game out, perhaps promote it once it finally got out. And I was all in. I mean, I'm not being compensated for Wheel of Time anymore, not for a long time. But the fact that there are new people out there able to play the game is just awesome. So all of those things came together, GOG and Night Dive and the rights holders and me, I guess. We and the community all got together and finally made this launch possible. And that's just awesome.
I only played about an hour of it so far, but I plan to dive more into it. I got my ass handed to me by some of the early Trollocs, so I just kind of... every time I play games, I have an infinite ammo weapon. I'm going to use the infinite ammo, but that weapon is not very useful when you're trying to fight.
That is not what you should be doing.
I figured that out pretty quick when I was starting to get my ass handed to me. Like, okay, but I haven't. I'm going to get back to it. But it was just to me to see, because I was introduced to Wheel of Time series back when I was in high school, so early 2000s. A friend of mine was reading Dragon Reborn, and I love Dragon. I'm like, it's about a dragon, which it's not. I mean, there are no dragons, but I remember that's what got my attention was the cover. And I had later on dug into the series. I have read the whole series once, and I read most of it a second time before I just fell off.
You are a fan.
I used to own most of them in hardcovers, but when I moved, I sold a bunch of them, and I regret it because I regret it a lot, but I didn't have room. I needed money. But I was a big fan of the series. I still really like the series. And just the fact that to meet someone, I meet very few people that have read that series that are book fans. Like most people don't know what Wheel of Time is. I feel that I ran into at least. I might not run into people that are book fans as much.
Certainly back then, when I was making the game, it was the second biggest fantasy series out there. And the first was Shannara. And we got that one too.
Oh, which series?
Shannara, Sword of Shannara, the Terry Brooks book. Novels.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's definitely got a following. I mean, it had a huge enough following that they made a TV show about it.
I couldn't believe the show actually finally happened. I was really surprised. Mm-hmm. I was happy. I haven't watched it yet for some reason. I have Amazon Prime, but I'm happy it exists. I mean, I guess for me, like, I have a certain way that I picture all these characters. I have a certain way that, like, and it's not, I don't know if I want to see it in live action or not.
Well, that's pretty aware of you. I'm impressed because, so I've dealt with a lot of licenses. I've dealt with Wheel of Time. I've dealt with Star Trek. I've dealt with Glee. And each one has very, very rabid fan base. They know what they want, what they like, and what they don't like. They know how they picture things. They know and a lot of them know what they want out of a game. And it's not necessarily what I'm going to deliver to them. So the fact that you are, not watching the show because it's not necessarily going to meet up with what you think in your head, you should do that unless you're willing to be open-minded to the vision of the creator.
I will at some point, and I'm sure I'll just enjoy it just because I'm just happy it exists. It actually made me want to go read the books, but as much as I love it made me want to go re-pick up Eye of the World. I really like Eye of the World, even though it's a book where I've read it 3 times at this point. I still have no idea whatever's going on in the end when he gets to that place where he takes like the one power itself and uses it against the Forsaken. I know we're getting kind of deep into if you don't know Wheel of Time, but I've always gotten so confused with that part for some reason. I know people are like, well, he just goes there and he has he uses it. For some reason my brain I remember being so confused when I read it.
Yeah, you should see the series and see how they dealt with that. It's very interesting.
Because I had a friend of mine who was talking about it, and he was telling me it's not the same, and I'm like, that's okay. I don't really remember it as well. So
the thing about the Wheel of Time books, like I remember, I had Eye of the World in paperback, and I think I had to buy it like 5 times because it kept breaking. It was so big that the binding couldn't hold, and I used it a lot. Obviously, I was researching, and I needed to keep referring back to it, and it would just fall apart. How
many books were published for Wheel of Time at the time you guys are working on this game?
I want to say like 6, but I don't really remember.
Okay. I know I could probably just look that up, but
yeah.
Okay. I know it was later in the series because I got into it when book 9, Winter Spring, had just came out, I think. Because I remember reading Winter Spring at some point, and I know there was a huge hiatus because then unfortunately Robert Jordan had passed away too, and then it was a few years before it got picked back up and then finished.
Right.
Which it has but it's just to find out that there was a game based on this book series just kind of blew me away the first time. I was really surprised because I unfortunately didn't play a lot of PC games growing up. I played a few in the 90s, but I was mostly a console gamer. I was I wasn't good at getting PCs to run, so I stayed away from them. But the only PC game I really played was Sid Meier's Magic the Gathering Chandelar, made by Microprose.
So I played that too. I played it because I was really into Magic.
Yes, every year
that was one of the places that I could play Magic against an AI at the time, and I kind of enjoyed that. But the game itself was pretty clunky.
Yeah, I love it though. I know the entire game by heart. Like I know every card they play. I don't need to read anything. It's just one of those games that's just in my head at this point. So every year I pick it up. Actually,
Magic was such a huge influence on me. That and Doom at the time. The combination of that experience became Wheel of Time. That was the inspiration for the multiplayer for Wheel of Time.
Okay.
It is a first-person shooter with the strategic choices of playing a Magic card.
Because I was playing a little bit of the game. Like I know in the beginning of the Wheel of Time game, you went to the shitty city Shadar Logoth or Logoth.
Shadar Logoth is the
okay.
way I say it.
Okay. I mean, I always read it. I never heard it out loud. So I'm like, wait a second, trying to say these words. And like the fact that you got to go there kind of was like really cool to me because it reminded me of, if I remember correctly, that's where the villain in the second book, Padden Fane, runs through.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, for me too.
Yeah. But just the fact that it exists. I mean, like one day I'm going to sit down and play it, but it made me excited to know like the show is out, like your game is out, and knowing that it's now going to interact with more people are going to know what Wheel of Time is. Just is a really exciting feeling to me. I love when old media comes back, as I was saying before. But also like with your Wheel of Time game, like I still felt like everything, it played fine. Like as I was trying it, I haven't played a lot of early first-person shooters or not, well, of that time, that era, not PC. Mine was GoldenEye, but like the way you can change your spells, I thought was pretty cool too. And you're actually playing characters from the book because you're playing the right? Isn't Elena from the book? Yes
and no. You're playing characters that are from the world because when I was originally going to design an adventure game based on Wheel of Time that used characters from his world, and he didn't like that. Jordan didn't like that. And so we ended up coming to an agreement where this would be its own story as a prequel to the first book. And so it was sort of monumental, dealt with all of the seals and, potentially people getting control of the seals who would release the Dark One. But it was all happened before the books ever started. Okay. So I have characters that are kind of like some of the characters that are in the books, but they're their own thing.
Okay, it wasn't the same Amarillion Seat then? Is a different character? The one from the
right.
Okay. See, it's been so long that when I heard the name, I thought it was the same character. That was the right hand of.
Well, so Elena's the main character from Wheel of Time, the game, and it is my own little inside joke because there seem to be so many like Elaines.
Yeah.
The names like that in Wheel of Time. So I was like, fine, I'm gonna riff on that. Feels very Wheel of Time to me.
I really thought it was because I could have sworn it was someone who's Green Ajah who was under the Amarillion Seat that had a name with an A or Elaine, something of that nature.
It's Amarillion Seat, by the way.
Okay. See, that's what happens when you never hear it and you're just reading.
Yep.
And you don't talk to many people about the series.
It's also Aes Sedai. Someone said that they heard that pronounced for like the first time in the TV show, and they were just learning that. Yeah, Aes Sedai. Okay,
I'm not even sure how I would have pronounced it. It's been so long, and I'm assuming your game didn't have any of the Sanchan or not in this. I'm assuming.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we had 4. Basically, it was kind of designed to be a multiplayer experience. The single player led to a multiplayer experience, which is Citadel. And I wanted 4 different factions. And so I kind of pulled factions from the world. One was actually the only character from the books, which is the Forsaken. And then a White Cloak, which he was a new character, but obviously the faction is still there. The Aes Sedai, and then the Hound. And the Hound is kind of a Padden Fane inspired character. He actually represents the evil from Shadar Logoth.
Okay.
So I had like 4 different, all diametrically opposed. They all have their own agendas, and they're all kind of all against each other. So they're all going after the seals, and that's sort of what Citadel was all about.
Okay. God, it's like so much. I remember bits and pieces of the series, so it's kind of interesting hearing all of it again. How long did you work in the gaming industry for?
Oh, geez, like 30 years, maybe. I mean, I still occasionally do some freelance work, so I'm not done. But okay. I started in high school with games for the Tandy color computer, mostly adventure games, and then I started my own company in college called Sundog Systems. And actually, if you can see in the video, there's no video on this interview, but if you can see over my head, that is an ad for Sundog Systems. I think it was the last inside front cover ad that I did in the last magazine for that computer, which is Rainbow Magazine. And so at the end of its life cycle, I had out of my dorm room the premier game software company for the color computer. And I continued that while I was in Legend, but eventually it kind of went away, and so I focused all of my efforts in Legend. So I've been making games forever.
And that's impressive, though. To be able to follow a passion of any sort.
When I graduated Penn State PSU, I thought I was going to be doing comp sci. In fact, I had an awesome offer to go to Bellcore, which is Bell Labs Research. Okay. And they were like, one of the top companies at the time for computer science. They were actually going to pay me to go to grad school and give me half salary while I was there. I mean, that's awesome. How can you turn down something? But I just couldn't bring myself to design operating systems for the rest of my life. I mean, that's clearly not where I had my passion. So I picked up the program for the Computer Game Developers Conference. I think it had only had a couple of years of running, but it was big enough now that they had a program. And in the back of the program, they had 50 companies that attended. And I wrote or called every single one of those companies and asked if they could give me a job. And one of them was on the East Coast, and that was Legend. And they offered me a job as a programmer, and so I signed up. So it was I didn't even know if you could make a living in it. And at that time, it wasn't sort of, you couldn't assume that you could make a living in games. But I found a company willing to pay me to do it, so I figured, why not? I'll roll the dice. Let's see how this goes, because I really, really wanted to make games.
That's how sometimes the best things in life happens, is when you just take a leap of faith. And that's what's happened for me. And personally, I've had things go well just by taking a leap of faith in something and finding it working out well. And I see that the last game you worked on was Unreal 2: The Awakening.
Well, that wasn't the last game I worked on, but that was one of them.
Okay, that's just... I own that game. I never played it, but I bought it for a regular Xbox.
Yeah, the reason that Epic wanted us to do that is because of Wheel of Time. They were so impressed with our work on Wheel of Time that they said, let's give you our flagship title, which is Unreal. You can do a sequel to that while we're off sort of moving more into multiplayer. The Unreal Tournament series, Unreal Championship, and that's what they wanted to focus on. They wanted to give us the storytelling part because that's what Legend was known for. We told really, really compelling stories. I didn't come into Unreal 2 until halfway through its development. So I didn't design a lot of the underpinnings. That was another guy, Mike Verdew, who was really fascinated with Unreal. Really, dug into that. But it hit a lot of challenges. And actually working with basically 3 different clients was difficult. We had Epic on one hand, they were actually not on the hook for paying for it. So they could say anything, and they had final approval. So they could say, no, it's not done for as long as they wanted. And there was no downside for them to say, no, it's not done. And then there was Infogram, and they were paying for it. And they had every intention of getting that thing out as quickly as possible. And then we had 4, because then there was Legend. Legend had its own agenda. Obviously, we wanted to make the game that we saw. And then there were the fans. The fans wanted what they wanted, which, in some cases overlapped with what we wanted or what all the other 3 wanted. And then when I came in and took it over, again, the last half of the development, I kind of had this project that I had to ship, and I had to try to make all of those people happy. And so that was difficult. And actually, if you want to know the chaos, the sheer anarchy that I had to deal with getting that product shipped, go to mysterium.blog. And I have a write-up about all of this. So the behind the scenes, all the blood spilled, everything. But on Unreal 2, on Wheel of Time, on Deathgate, on a bunch of the games that I worked on. And you'll also, at mysterium.blog, you'll find information about my books, too.
Okay, and there will be a link in the show notes for all that.
Mm-hmm.
So people can find that.
Sounds good.
Okay, it was just one of the things I was pulling up showed Unreal 2 as one of the last games that you worked on.
Actually, after that, I went to I was the creative director on Star Trek Online.
For the more recent one?
The only one. But I worked with Perpetual. I did a bunch of work on that product, but it eventually got transferred over to, what's the name of the MMO company that shipped a version of that? I can't remember. But they took a lot of our work, certainly a lot of our the developmental work that we had done, and then they made a version of it. But I went to a company called Super Ego when I worked on Rat Race, which was kind of an episodic sitcom adventure game, which was pretty cool. And that was for Sony. And then I ended up doing some mobile titles. Oh, I did a game called Ravenshire Castle, which was a social game for Facebook, which was kind of awesome for social games back then, because this was the time of what were some of the games back then?
Like Mafia Wars?
Yeah, but not so much Mafia Wars. What was the Invest and Express games? Farmville, Frontierville, those kind of games. So Zynga's, mainstays. And I came into that world, and that's where all the money was. That's where all the game development was. So if you wanted a job, that's what you were going to do. But one of the titles, actually, John Romero, and he worked on the first game called Ravenwood Fair for Lol Labs. And so I came in, and I kind of had to do the sequel to that. And it turns out that the work that they had done just wasn't the direction that they really should go. And so I came up with something completely different from Ravenshire Castle that I won't go into the design, but I loved it. I was prepared to change the landscape of social gaming and make it into real gaming. And then the company went under, which was, after Legend, I thought, I was at Legend for 15 years. I thought that's the way companies worked, but that's not the way companies work. Companies are around for a couple of years and then they go under. That's most of, unless they're a huge studio that's around forever, that's what you find. And so that product limped its way over the finish line and was buggy. I would never have given my money to it, but it was beautiful. And the actual gameplay, which was you build up your castle and then you go and sneak around other people's castles and steal stuff and then come back to yours. And if you get caught, then you yell out to your friends to come and save you. It was so fun. It was so fun. I really loved that game.
I remember those style of games.
Yeah. And then I went and I worked for another company, and I made some mobile titles, including a game called, it was a Japanese company called K-Lab with an American arm. And there I made Crystal Casters, which was kind of a gacha type game. Are you familiar with the term gacha?
I am. I played some. I don't play a lot of mobile games, but yeah, I'm very familiar with that. Like Fire Emblem is an example. And any, Loot Crate is an example. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but for a while, that's the way pretty much all Japanese games work. And so, and I like being able to sort of spend money and make sure that you get something. If it's a power up, it's gone. You've spent your money, you'll never see that again. But at least with a gacha, you have something that's going to make your collection better. So I kind of enjoyed that. And then I made Glee. And Glee was based on the Fox show. And that was a really challenging license because I'd never even seen it. But then I watched it and I found something to love about it. I love the music. I love the writing, honestly. And we created a game that was very true to the source work, to source material. And the audience, the fans of the show loved the game. So I think I succeeded there too. I didn't even know there was a Glee game for mobile until just now.
Yep.
I don't mess around with mobile too much. I've only had a couple mobile games that I played. Mario Kart I played a bunch of, and then Little Kingdom I spent way too much money on at one point in my life. So.
Well, mobile games, if you don't see it when it's out and hot, then you're never going to see it because they just go away. It's not like the old games you could find a box. Eventually a collector could even sell you a box. But with mobile games, they're just off the server and you'll never see them again.
Little Empire, that's what it was called.
What's that?
Still, Little Empire was the game it was called that I spent way too much money on at one time. But it was the same idea. It wasn't power-ups that you bought. You bought heroes or you bought units that you couldn't get otherwise, like equipment. So it felt a little better when you were spending money than just something that you used for one time and went away. So I get where you're coming from with that.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, but I want to ask anyway, have you read all the Wheel of Time books then?
I actually haven't read all of them. I hit the sort of doldrums where there was no wind, and I got lost at sea. I just couldn't get through it, and I never came back. I regret it, honestly, and one of these days I will go back and finish them because I know that it really picks up, and I think Sanderson's work is very, very well received. I want to see how it ends, but I just haven't been able to bring myself to get through that stretch.
It does have, from what I remember, he did a good job of wrapping up the story. He did connect everything, and everything makes sense of what was going on. It doesn't feel like stuff just falls off. Like he explains the Shan-Chan, he explains everything going on, and everybody kind of has their own place, and it
That's
feels
pretty
very
impressive.
good.
That's very impressive, honestly.
From what I remember being happy with the way the ending worked and how everything got wrapped up and understood. Because I remember I had so many questions in that series.
Evidently, there was a fair amount of notes about how Jordan wanted to finish it. That said, I don't know how much of that was what they told everybody, because I've been on the other side of that, where they're saying one thing to people, and then the actual developer has to sort of pick up the pieces. And so I give him a lot of credit, regardless of whatever notes he had. I give Sanderson a lot of credit for finishing up in a compelling way that fans are satisfied.
Yeah, because it was a lot. I mean, I remember some books where it would split away from the main cast and then talk about other people for like a whole book. Like,
right.
One of the three main characters, Matt, disappears for like I think a couple books. He's gone until randomly he just shows up again. So he does that. I remember that. I think he's gone like 9 and 10 or so. Like or 8 or 9. He's gone for a little while. Where he goes somewhere and you just forget about him for thousands and thousands of pages. Did you have a favorite character in that series?
Jeez.
I know it's been a while. But
I wouldn't. I don't know if it's meaningful for me to say anyone. I mean, I could say Rand, but who knows? I mean, at this point, I'd almost have to reread it to really get an opinion.
Okay, no problem. I did want to ask, what authors inspired you to get into writing?
Probably a lot of the classic fantasy writers. And so, like, I can just look over at my shelf here. Stephen R. Donaldson, I was really influenced by the Covenant series. Eddings, Terry Brooks. Actually, Piers Anthony, really early on, was an influence in my teens. And that's one of the reasons. And we did a Xanth game at Legend because I was such a big fan of his early work, because I went after him, but I didn't get the license. It wasn't my license to make. Someone else took that on because I was doing Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman's Deathgate. And I don't consider myself to be, a punny writer. So it's probably best I didn't do it, because you really have to embrace puns if you're going to want to write in Xanth. But one of the reasons that I decided, we had done that game, and I decided to go ahead and ask Piers Anthony if he wanted to read my book. And he immediately came back with, no, I've been reading too many books, and I don't have time to write. And even if I did, you probably wouldn't like what I had to say about it. So, because I am an old curmudgeon, and I know this about myself. So, just go away. And I said, well, can I send it to you? Just, on the off chance you take a look at it. And he said, fine. All right, whatever. So I did. And the next day he writes back and said, okay, I couldn't put it down. And I have my review coming shortly. And I think within a couple of days, he had on his webpage, he posted a review that was some of the most glowing stuff I've ever heard. And this was my debut book. Nobody had really responded to it yet. And suddenly I had a cover quote from Piers Anthony. And it was, and the quote is, "This is what fantasy fiction should be." And you can't get much better than that.
No, that's really good.
From an established New York Times bestselling author of one of my childhood heroes. Fantasy heroes, Piers Anthony. So that was kind of awesome.
That had to feel really good.
Yeah.
I mean, I can
actually,
understand.
That moment when I got that, I almost fell over. It's one of those, something just sort of grabs you and it's like, is this real? And the other was when I won this thing for that same book. That's that actual gold medal from Reader's Favorite. I mean, you can hear it. You can't see it. You can hear it. Yeah, winning that threw me for a loop too, because again, my debut novel, and that's sort of setting the stage for everything to come. And it showed that people really love that world and those characters. And if you read the book, you'll understand. I intended that thing to be a one shot. I blow up that world at the end, and so turning it into a series was not obvious by any stretch. And I never expected to. But people liked the world so much, and I liked being in it and writing in it, that I sort of started experimenting. And actually, a few edits that I made to that book enabled me to keep going. It opened up the world a little bit more. And so House of Prophecy is the result of all the thinking I had been doing about how to expand that world. And I'm excited to get that book out there.
Okay, that's the second book of this series, correct?
So,
because isn't the War book, that's another, or Game of War, is that another series? Or
so no, it's a prequel to Child of Chaos. But had I released them, I would have made Game of War Book 1 and Child of Chaos Book 2. That's how connected they are. And that's how much House of Prophecy pulls on both of the books. You really have to read both. You don't have to, but you really should read both before you move on to House of Prophecy. That said, so Game of War, the main character of Game of War is a priest of war. And he was a standout character in Child of Chaos. And I originally meant it to be like sort of a free reader magnet, a small novella or something to pull people in. But it turned out to be an even bigger book than Child of Chaos and really well received. I actually think that it's possible that it may win more awards than Child of Chaos because it's already won a couple. So I think I may end up going back to him in that world. So it might be good that it's its own thing. So I can do Game of War and then Game of War 2 and do a few books in that series, and then the Child of Chaos, the Chronicles of Chaos series, moving forward with Galen, who's the main character. Okay.
Yeah, I looked you up and I found you. You're on Kindle.
Yep.
That's what pulled from Amazon.
Yeah, all of my books are on Kindle Unlimited. If you're part of Kindle Unlimited, you can read them for free.
Okay. A lot of people probably are. I unfortunately don't. I never got into reading it in Kindle, but I've always meant to at some point. But I know a lot of people do enjoy that.
Especially like voracious readers. There's only so much bookshelf space you've got.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, you're going to start filling up boxes and put them somewhere. And I think it's better, actually, honestly, to have e-versions of those books. Unless you're a collector.
Did you go through a regular
covers if you're collecting?
Oh yeah, those look nice, but you are right, take up so much space. That's why I sold a lot of my collection, which I regret now, because I was moving into a small apartment.
But I make the ebooks available on day one, but I get a lot of people who buy signed hardcovers from me. The people who actually really, really want to collect the books, and so that's a valid way to get my series.
Did you go through a regular publisher for publishing this?
I'm indie.
Okay. So you're self-published then?
I started out with a small press. I actually signed a contract with them. And this was right before COVID hit. And so while I was waiting for all of their hoops to jump through in order to get Child of Chaos out, I actually started writing Game of War and did a bunch of editing on my own. And then they decided that they were no longer going to do paper versions of books. And, for an indie author, one of the reasons that you do this is to hold your book in your hand, and then to hand that book to someone who really wants to read it, and then to see that book on bookshelves, bookstore shelves, and if you don't get any of that, if it's all about ebooks, then it's all about a business. And then when they said, oh, but wait, if you want paper versions of your book, we can deliver them to you at a premium price. Then I realized that they were transitioning into a vanity press. And at that point, I was done.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? I can do this on my own. I don't need a small press. Basically, taking away a bunch of profits and taking away my rights in case I want to do something like a TV show or a movie or a game.
That doesn't make any sense if you're forking most of the bill over.
Yeah, and they're not. Small presses don't do very much. They don't really promote, which is the only reason to go with a publisher is for promotion.
Yeah.
So I'm still not the best at marketing. I've got a lot to learn, and I'll probably be saying that my entire life. But I know more about it now than I ever did, and I'll always try new things to try to get the book out there. And I'd rather do that than be tied to a small press that isn't helping.
Okay. The reason I asked, I have a friend of mine who is a published author too, who I think he did the kind of the same thing. It's called The Fifth Civilization. His name is Peter Bingham, and he self-published too. That's why I was kind of curious.
Yeah, at this point, it's like, you see, the quality of the book, and this is print on demand at this point. So you don't have to do 10,000 units in order to get a quality version of the book. And so with Amazon and Ingram Spark and a few other potential presses out there, there's really no reason not to do it yourself if you can sell direct to your customer. And so I'm really happy to be able to do that. What we weren't there, 10 years ago. The infrastructure just didn't exist to give indie authors a chance to produce their own product. And, honestly, I love that. I was doing that from my dorm room. I was making games and, copying them onto floppy disks and putting them into the sleeves and sending them off to people. I love doing that kind of stuff.
I think there's something special about when, something produced without the idea of just, becoming filthy rich or being a corporation. There's something about when it's a single person. I mean, yes, I know corporation business have to make money, but this idea when somebody's doing it for the money and for the love of it, you get a different product, I think, too, a lot of times with writing or game design.
When I was making computer games, and the same holds true here, although it's not as obvious now for me, but when I was making computer games, the thing that kept me moving forward, the thing that kept me writing more games is when I found out that a kid asked for my game and the parent was buying it from me in order to put it under the Christmas tree for that kid. And having that kid open it on Christmas morning, knowing that's the thing he really wanted, and it was something that I made, it was really cool. Quite awesome.
Do you remember what game it was?
No, it was it happened many times.
Okay.
I mean, and especially as I got into PC games, making the adventure games and Wheel of Time, I reached a much bigger audience. I have no idea, if any of them ended up under the tree.
You're good.
But when I was I was taking the orders when I was in college for my Sundog. And so knowing that and they tell me in the letter or on the phone message that they were getting it for their son. Or I'd go to Rainbow Fest, which was the Color Computer convention, where I sold to people who told me that they were getting it for their children. And that was awesome. It wasn't about the money, although there was money to be made. It was about the fact that I made something for these people. I made something that they enjoyed. And it was, there's no better feeling than that.
No, there's something I always go by. There's a Jason Mraz quote that I heard randomly on XM once where his wife said something about where he wasn't feeling good. She's like, go create something. And I always think about that, especially when 2020 happened and the world went to shit, for lack of a better word. I just really I dived completely into my podcast and just creating that, even though just something, it has a different feeling. So I know exactly what you mean. There's something so great about knowing that you're creating more than what I was doing, but to know that to create something that's going to affect somebody's life in a way is amazing.
And actually that brings us around full circle to Wheel of Time. Again, I'm not making any money off of Wheel of Time, but the fact that it's reaching a new audience now, that other people can enjoy it, people who've never heard of the books, people who've never heard of the game, who've never heard of me or Legend, now suddenly they have the opportunity to experience this for the first time. That's really cool.
It's awesome. And hey, now I can make the joke, the wheel weaves, the wheel will, and maybe more people understand me with the show around. Because I do say it randomly to people. I have said it over time, and they'll look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? And every so often somebody will be like, I get your joke.
That quote is in a cutscene in the game. So
I just love that idea that fate is always linked together, and that no matter what happens here, the life will keep going on eventually. That's what the Wheel of Time's kind of about. Even if the bad guys win, everybody gets killed, eventually things will come back again. The only thing I want to ask you is, what is your favorite genre of games? And do you have a favorite game?
So I guess my favorite game right now would be Hearthstone. I've been playing it pretty much ever since it came out. Okay. And I play it usually at least once a day. I used to play Magic a lot, and that dropped off the face of the earth for me. I just didn't have the time, and I couldn't keep up with, all that you had to do in order to be.
They keep changing.
Magic. And
I can't.
And so then when Hearthstone came out, it basically said, okay, we're going to make this, we're going to smooth all the edges, all the corners down, and we're going to make it, playable and take advantage of the fact that it's on a computer. So random things happen. You can get a card that, it doesn't end up in your collection, but you can because it's a computer game. And so all of the creative need in me to play Magic was satisfied with Hearthstone. So I keep playing it because it's a lot of fun and there's a lot of randomness. And it's the kind of game that you can lose and say, okay, well, next time I'm going to beat you because the cards are going to come out in a different order. So you always feel like even if you lose, it's not because you have no chance. You always have a chance. And so that's a lot of fun. And the other games that I play, and honestly, what's weird is I told you that the inspirations for Wheel of Time was Magic and Doom. Yeah. And now I'm playing Hearthstone and Call of Duty, Warzone. And it's pretty much the same genres as I started with.
Just very changed. I've never touched Hearthstone. I know a little bit about it, but I I used to be really big into Magic physically, and I spent way more money than and after that I stopped, and I've never touched another card game again after that. So.
Oh, that's a shame. So it burnt you out.
Yeah, it really did. I was younger too, but I just kind of never got back to it. Hearthstone looks interesting. I mean, I've seen it before. I just never have taken the time out to try it. I'm very big about it's got to be a game that I can play, finish, put away, and then move on to the next game. For me, anything multiplayer online, I stay far away from.
That's a shame because that's the landscape of the world now.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that is what games are. I mean, it's games as service rather than games as product. And so,
retro.
Yeah, and I get that. I get that. But I also I was fascinated with the idea of, multiplayer from the beginning and bringing people together an experience that they can continue to have over a long, long period of time. I mean, the fact that Wheel of Time, as an example, people play it to this day, I think is very, very cool. And it's, I wanted to tell a story, but I also wanted to have an experience that people would just speak to people and that they could continue to play and find fun in and continue to get better. It was kind of interesting when I first started playing multiplayer, when it was out in the world, I was the best in the world, and that was really cool. Nobody could beat me because I had played it so much before it released. And then 3 weeks after that, I started getting my ass handed to me. And I was like, now the real players have found this game and they've discovered things I had never even intended, which is the ultimate good design. If there's emergent gameplay that's coming out of the systems that I put together, that even, strategies that I didn't anticipate, that's awesome. That's when you know that it's bigger than you.
Okay. And last thing I wanted to bring up is I see that now you teach. What do you teach?
Yeah. Well, I teach a computer, it's not computer, it's a game design class.
Okay.
It's at UC Berkeley, and it's for international students that are looking to get into college. So it's right on the tail end of high school. And I haven't taught it for the last couple of years because of COVID, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But the period of time that I did teach, it was awesome. I kind of had to figure out, I actually, they contacted me and asked me if I was interested. And I'm like, well, I'm not a teacher. He said, no, that's fine. We'll figure that out. And indeed I did. I figured out sort of how to make it less about computer games, because that's sort of where they came from. The guy who did it before me taught computer games and everybody coded a game. And to me, that's about fixing bugs more than it is about sort of the fundamentals of game design, figuring out what your inner loop is, figuring out what what inspires you to make that game and how you communicate it to other people, ways to tell stories within the game, those games and such. And so I ended up doing half of the course about what are the fundamentals, and then the other half about let's develop something that's more of an idea, but fundamentally sound that you can communicate to other people. And the end of the course is them doing a presentation on their dream game. And what was cool for me is at the beginning, I would ask, how many people actually would consider game design as a career? And maybe one hand would go up. But at the end, half of the hands went up. And that I consider to be a real success.
I mean, that is anything from like teaching. I mean, I don't teach, but I'm a manager of different things. It's about connecting with people. I mean, there's, if you can connect with people, you can be a good teacher. I think same thing, good manager. That's what I believe, at least what I've seen personally, and what.
Well, and also you have to understand the material.
Yes.
I mean, I'm coming from a place of I've made all the mistakes that you could make, and so I can tell you about them, and I can tell you sort of, what do you need to focus on and what isn't important. And I'll tell you, the first thing I do, the first lesson is I take everybody out of the classroom, we go into a field, and I have a bunch of stuff. And I say, let's make a game right now. Let's figure out the rules, and then let's play it. And, nobody knows what to do. Everybody just sort of looks at things and just, okay, well, how about if I hit him with this? And I say, okay, well, let's establish, maybe this is a game board. Maybe this is, sort of a backyard kind of game. What kind of things do we want to achieve? What are our goals? What are our obstacles to how to achieve those goals? And the thing that I tell, I have a Brad Bird story. It's not a story about Brad Bird. It's a story that he told at a presentation, which is a producer goes into a theater where there's this musical that he's in charge of. But everybody in the theater is just standing around doing nothing. The dancers are just wandering, talking to each other. The musicians are just smoking a cigarette. And he goes up to the choreographer and he says, what the hell's going on? Nobody's doing anything. How are we going to be ready? And he goes, I don't know what to do. And the producer says to him, just do something so we can change it. And that's the basis of almost every creative endeavor, is just do something. Just start, and then it will eventually evolve into the thing that you want. But if you never get started, you'll never get to that. So everything is about evolution. Everything is about editing. And that's true. I use that Brad Bird story when we talk about writing, too. It's because if you don't make a first draft, then you'll never make it to where it needs to be. You'll always think, well, it's not good enough. I can't write it because I suck. It's okay to suck. It's okay to suck initially, because eventually it'll get better.
Yeah. When I was younger in high school, I wrote a novel. Unfortunately, I don't have it anymore, but I did go through the whole, and I remember doing that where I would go and rewrite and edit, and every time you went back to it, it improved so much as you see what you didn't like.
It's not just about the writing specifically, for me anyway, because normally I can write pretty well. I mean, I've got the grammar down, and that's not a problem. The thing is, it's about that way for game design too. You learn as you're making it. You discover what's fun. You discover what the themes are, what the characters are. Maybe the characters take you in a direction you didn't expect. So your outline is only good. The plan is only good until it meets the enemy. And then you find out where you failed. But then you also find out where you succeed. And so in a game, if you don't capitalize on what's fun, then you are doing a disservice to the experience. And in the book, if you don't figure out where your themes are coming out, or where those characters want to take the story, which is better than what you originally thought, which absolutely happens all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't take advantage of that, then you're doing a disservice to the story. So the first draft, I think Neil Gaiman is the one that said that. First draft is for you. It's basically your outline. Second draft is what the story should have been when you started writing the first draft. Third draft is, getting it all polished up by an editor. And the fourth draft is what you end up releasing.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Neil Gaiman is a hell of a writer too, though.
So. Yeah, he's absolutely one of my heroes.
I've read some of his comics, and very, very good stuff.
I have a signed Death #1 from him. He came to Manassas, Virginia, a comic book store, and I managed to meet him there. That was pretty cool.
It always feel I didn't meet him when he was at one of the conventions I went to, but I didn't go up and meet him and have him sign anything.
Oh, that's a shame.
I didn't know he was going to be there, so I didn't bring any of my books. So I didn't do anything. But I try doing it now. I'm better at meeting people that, for like whenever certain authors come to things, I'll go and get something signed. I try to. And last thing I want to go out on is, where can people find your book at?
So I'm on Amazon, and so you can just search under Child of Chaos or Chronicles of Chaos. However, I would definitely push people to go to mysterium.blog. It gives you a link to my web store, which is, you don't have to remember this, but it's mysteriummerchandise.bigcartel.com. But there's a link there to go right to it. There I sell not only paperbacks and the hardbacks signed, but I also sell boxed copies of Wheel of Time. So these are unopened, and they are signed as well. And I get more interest in that than you might suspect. It's a classic at this point, and there are collectors who really, really want them. So
people love big box games, I have found out. I am not one of them, but people love that. I have no nostalgic for PC really in that era. I was playing Super Nintendo and Genesis and PlayStation 1. That's my nostalgic.
I actually still sell the old Sundog games, the old Coco Sundog games. So there are still people out there with Cocos as well.
I'm not surprised. And there will be a link in the show notes to find your website and your books. And I want to thank you again for taking time out to talk with me.
Absolutely, it was great.
Classic Gamers Guild, where we met.
Yeah,
a really good Facebook group. I'm friends with a bunch of people a bunch of the admins in that group. And if you enjoyed this content, we have tons of other episodes we've done for you. We've done over 300 episodes. We cover games, movies, comics. We do interviews. So definitely go check all that out. You can find us on Podbean if you're looking for all the old episodes. Otherwise, find us wherever you get your podcast. I want to give a shout out to my awesome intro and outro, courtesy of Helena at Hell Hasphere. You can follow her on TikTok. And I want to give a shout out to my buddy Bill Tucker, who did the MCU roundup with me. So definitely go check that out. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, but only audio, but we are on YouTube. So, and again, thank you again for joining me, Glenn. And if you enjoyed what you heard, go check out his books. Go check out his content that he has. And go play Wheel of Time. You can go buy it on GOG, just because it's still cool. And it's Wheel Time. Go read the damn books. Wheel Time, too.
Yeah, me too.
And we will see you guys all next time. Bye, everybody.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.